Welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou, and this is the podcast where we aim to help recruiters, founders, managers, business owners get 1% better after every single episode. Every episode is unfiltered, unedited, uncensored, where we just have a free-flowing back and forth conversation with the aim to add tactics, tools, techniques, anecdotes, war stories, all in the hopes for you guys to get 1% better after every episode. It would mean the world to me if you could like, comment, subscribe, follow the podcast on all the channels that you view this on. We have a newsletter as well on LinkedIn if you could go and follow and subscribe onto that as well so you don't miss any episode. And if you find this or any of the other episodes enjoyable, please share them with your friends, your colleagues, and anyone that you think could benefit from it. Enough from me, let's get into today's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Howell from TenRecs. Mark and I have worked very closely together, and the guys from TenRecs were fantastic by sponsoring me at the Recruitment Agency Expo, so I'm always eternally grateful for them. Mark, thank you very much for taking the time today. Really excited to get into it. How are we doing?
Yeah, good, very good. We're growing at a hell of a pace. We have smashed all targets that we planned internally. Absolutely knackered, but good, really good.
Awesome, man. Right. So for people tuning into this episode, what do we expect? So the main kind of topic of conversation we're going to talk about today is gamification in sales and software, which again, we'll go on to kind of what TenRecs are doing with that. But it's going to be a really exciting conversation. Another couple of things we'll talk to once we've nailed that conversation to death is ego in recruitment from like a founder perspective, from a recruiter perspective, the tribal behavior, how things have shifted in the industry, and material motivations as well. We were speaking a little bit before this around how, especially for me, when I was a 21-year-old, what did I buy with my first big commission check? A Cartier watch. Would I do that now? Absolutely not. So there's a little bit of a shift there from what's happened and whatnot. But let's get into the gamification side of things, Mark. Look, you guys are doing some really exciting things at TenRecs. I know there's not too many businesses within, especially the recruitment space, that offer this gamification and stuff like that. But before we talk a lot about, I guess, what you guys are actually doing at TenRecs, what do you, because there's some people that might be tuning into this that might go, gamification in sales? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, what do you actually mean by that?
So in a sales-driven job, and recruitment is so aggressive. My background's kind of 20 years in recruitment, all levels up to director level. And what I found is that salespeople need motivations. So if you say to someone, use a system, it has AI, that doesn't motivate your sales guys. But if you say use a system, you get to see first, you get to see how you're doing, you win prizes, you give certain angles to gamify the process that can be quite off-putting for people. And then all of a sudden the incentive tends to drive people really hard to do well and to enjoy what they do. And I think it's something to be proud of as well, because recruitment is not easy. It's a very tough job. There's very few wins, but those little wins can really make a year. So I think if you can really maximize that from a digital way, because it's very manual, ringing a bell, all the different things, having the prize on the board. I just think it kind of helps the front end do what they should do, so the rest of the business flows really well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Do you know what? It reminds me when I was the L&D manager in my last job, to drive activity, we do sprints, and we would do like who gets the most interviews, gets to leave on time, all the rest of it. But when you do too many of those like in-house kind of activities, sometimes people just do it for the sake of it. Like I remember doing it as a 23-year-old, making calls to candidates that was shocking, just to have more call time, etc. But what I did in my last company that was, I assumed it would work, and it worked like a tree. I literally just went to like Sainsbury's, like the little express store, bought like 10 like scratch cards, blue tacked them to the wall, and everyone's like kind of like looking at me. I haven't mentioned anything, and people are like, "What's he doing?" You had like a £10 scratch card, £5 scratch card, all the way down to like a £1 scratch card. And then as soon as it hit like 2 o'clock and everyone's back from their lunch and all the rest of it, I was like, right. The £10 scratch card is for the person that pulls the most jobs this week. The £5 scratch card is the most amount of interviews or whatever it is, just for all these activities. And then I said, and the L&D team is going to basically go through all the data. And if we see that you've put interviews in and or like you've added a job but it's not really qualified, it won't count. So we were driving quality, but driving the quantity and the activity.
Yeah, yeah.
You can just imagine it as someone that's been in this industry for a while. The noise on the sales floor, people just going
Oh,
out their way to get on the phone.
absolutely.
Someone's like booked an interview. They're like, yeah, I booked an interview like that. And they're looking up at, bro, it's a fucking £10 scratch card. Do you know what I mean? But it's
Yeah,
just that
yeah.
little external thing, like gamifying the process and just making people drive. And it's that competitiveness that in the recruitment office that's just so key, right?
Well, so in a company I worked with many years ago, we found that we used to get a monthly, like, essentially Excel.
Yeah.
So we get a monthly Excel. It'd have who's first all the way down to kind of the bottom places. And what I used to drive me all month, and it was purely that feeling of I need to see this sheet and I need to
Mhm.
be at the top. And I think when people have a year target and you're sales and you're driven for quick wins in placing people fast, they're kind of counterintuitive things.
Mhm.
So I think what I used to find is pushing people to make more sales calls daily is quite negative sometimes, and they feel like they're getting hammered. Whereas if you have a target that does the job for you, you're naturally going to push harder all day, and you're going to be happy about it because you want to
Yeah.
win. So your kind of pessimism turns to optimism. Oh, I can't do this job. I can't be done. Oh,
Yeah.
turns to all of a sudden, I'm going to get this. I'm going to win. And all of a sudden, you start to realize that the activity increases, and it is a numbers game.
Yeah.
You want people to like you. And if your phone become a negative space, people tend to not really want to deal with you. But
Mm.
if you phone in, you don't care about rejection because all you care about is actually, I'm going to hit this target and win.
Yeah.
It's strange. It totally distracts you from all of the negatives that will put you off doing your job, I
Yeah.
find.
100%. So look, in terms of where we are in the market right now, in the tech space, I suppose for recruitment,
Yeah,
there's a couple of companies that offer data analytics, some form of gamification.
yeah,
I used what was called Cube 19 back in the day. It wasn't necessarily gamification; it was more pure like data analytics, and I found that to be really really useful.
yeah.
But what when you say the gamification and the software element, because I know this is what you guys are working on at TenRecs, what do you specifically mean? Because we've obviously spoken there about like scratch cards in the office and all these types of
Yeah, yeah,
things,
of
but
course.
to have this built into a software seems like quite an
Yeah.
exciting thing, right?
It is, yeah, yeah, and it's technically an extension of the kind of unique service we already offer. So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of companies that we've seen in the market right now, they tend to offer you bolt-on packages for the start, middle, and finish in recruitment.
Yeah.
So your sales staff have a CRM, then you've got your middle office that do all of the kind of the accounting in a separate system or a bolt-on, and they pay for it, and then you have your pay and bill, which is separate. The problem you've got is loads of CRMs aren't accurate, and when they tend to then compete, because it's not really, it doesn't matter. The figures aren't accurate and therefore it's very difficult.
Mm.
The reason that we're looking to move to this is because our system actually is accurate from point A all the way through to running your operation if you choose to.
Mm-hmm.
So the figures that we have created, it's granular level, who's getting commission for what. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, we're elaborating it into actually then you can have prizes. You've got trophies for who's first in different areas, the highest running total perm biller, temp biller,
Mm-hmm.
all these different areas of multiple trophies as well as achievements for actually achieving certain milestones, essentially using the system properly to kind of reinforce people doing well. So
Mm.
instead of all these manual things that kind of work for a month or two,
Yeah.
ours is aimed at driving people to feed the ego to kind of compete in a very positive way. And I
Mm.
think what you find is that if people then see and they've got these goals and they're seeing the figures momentarily, what you
Mm.
tend to find, or I always found with the staff I've worked with, is that, including myself, is that
Mm-hmm.
you will be pushed harder because then you're constantly battling to
Yeah.
win different things. And also, we want to try and make it in a place where it's actually team focused, also, so you can choose. So you've then got collaborative kind of targets that actually mean KPIs being hit, certain phone calls made, or different kind of meetings
Mm-hmm.
booked, versus the actual financials of what you're making. So if your business is more activity led and you don't like people seeing figures, that's fine. But if you actually want to see the true money being made and what they're making, which is kind of where I like to focus or always have,
Yeah.
it incentivizes them also to get the trophies, to show where they are. And it's kind of, people like to collect, people like to see
Mm-hmm.
their
Yeah.
what they've attained and to be known as the big biller.
Mm.
It's a good motivation for the junior staff to see, I want to be there, I want to steal his place, I want to get better.
Yeah.
And I feel that sometimes motivates people to put higher quotes of margin in,
Yeah.
etc. But yeah, for us, it's very much digitizing the full plan so that the back office doesn't have to send a spreadsheet when all the work's been
Yeah.
done. I think
Yeah.
the fundamental issue what I found is that if you get the spreadsheet month one or quarter one, you've already put the activity in, so you've not had the incentive to actually push hard.
Mm.
So you need that incentive daily to come in and go, right, I'm only £2,000 below number one. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make these sales calls. I'm going to make a 4 grand fee today. I'm going to push for it. And I think it helps to really push where you might not have been as quite as bothered
Yeah.
to achieve great things and realize what you're capable of.
Yeah.
I used to be couldn't wait to see figures, and I think most recruiters are similar because they work so hard to attain something so little. Maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
20% of you is the success, 80% is the pure carnage hard work, and therefore to get even if it's just to see your figures yourself and you don't care about others but you care about your own, I
Mhm.
just feel it's a huge impact.
Oh, it's huge.
Uh,
I can't remember who I spoke to about this on the podcast recently, but my first proper job where I was there for 2 years in recruitment, the sales director would go to the finance team in house, print off like a sheet in black and white, and just walk around the sales floor and just shout out people's figures on a Friday. Because obviously, largely we were on the temp side, so we
yeah,
had
yeah.
no access, we had no spreadsheet, we had no database for figures or anything. We just solely relied on the sales directors to be like, right, Charles, you've done 8K this week. Well done, mate. Great week. Darren, you've done 20K. Mark, you've done this. And I'm like, right, okay, cool. So when I left that company, and as you interview for a recruitment company, they say, what are your figures? I'm texting my manager being like, what were my figures? And he says, let me go and ask Steph in finance. He's like, oh, you build like 300K in the 2 years that you were here. I'm like, right. But there's
Yeah.
no proof of it. It's just like word of
Yeah.
mouth type thing. So when I moved to Projectus, and it was perm, right? They used Cube 19 back in the day. It's been bought by Bullhorn now. They had a leaderboard in the office, right? And I'll never forget this. It was like my second week, and I was looking up at this leaderboard, and I was on zero. And I'd only been there 2 weeks. I've only just done my onboarding. I've only just gone
Yeah,
through
yeah.
like the slight sort of training and whatnot. And I just remember feeling absolutely furious about it. Just like, how the fuck am I bottom? Even though I was only there for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got my first split deal, but it was like 500K's worth of on my figures because it was one of those ones when you knew rather than it being the 5K on your figures, we'll just put 500 on your figures and you'll just get £500 commission and the actual figures on someone. Well, anyway, long story short, that was that. But I just remember feeling so angry about it. And as soon as I started to build a desk and then I started to put a couple of deals through, I wasn't bottom anymore. I was on like 23K in the first few months or so. And then it started fresh from January 2017, it was. And that was just in the back of my head. I am never, ever going to be bottom. And that goes into the conversation
Yeah,
we're having
yeah.
a bit about the ego. And I feel that's almost like the positive aspect of ego. Because if you don't have that in recruitment, what's really driving you to be successful? Are you actually happy being bottom of the leaderboard? You know what I mean?
I think you create like a nervous energy. Like I tend to find that the best recruiters that I've worked with, and I used to build very high, was I put the pressure on myself. I'm not
Yeah.
willing to stay here because I'm worried that they're gonna beat me. But you normally put so much work in that you just absolutely trounce the competition, a lot of the time because you're so on yourself. And I think
Mm.
the most self-motivated people that push harder that do it. And I worked out that I could make 100 calls in a day easy. And because I could do that, as like if I can make 120, I'll be more successful.
Mhm.
So instead of thinking, oh, I've done enough, I'm the kind of person who go, okay, I've managed to do that now. How do I scale this?
Yeah.
So for me, it was always about yielding more because I was
Mm.
so scared of somebody behind me taking over. And
Yeah.
then the ego in me said, hang on a minute, there's nobody better than me. And the reality is, everyone's as good as the market they're in, the roles they've got,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
activity they're doing. And it's not always it's not just that. But for me, I
Mhm.
was like, well, I'm going to stay up here. No matter what happens, I'm
Yeah.
going to make it happen. And it's quite funny how something so minimal actually drives you with you. And again, you've got people you like, you've got people you don't get on with, you've got people that you get on, like as a team, that people are in different offices. And I feel that you kind of, it does, that the competition is what keeps the business healthy. As long as,
Yeah.
you are pushing against each other. And if you don't get on with somebody who's really good, then you go, well, I need to beat them. I
Yeah.
need to beat them.
Yeah.
They're not better than me. And whenever I
Yeah.
see them, if I'm lower than them, they're going to rub it in my face. So I am
Yeah.
going to and it's great. And I feel that, when somebody used to beat me, I'd be like, genuinely, I'd be like, well done. You've created something that I need to now
Yeah.
beat.
100%. I
Um,
wanted to ask you actually, because there's a few recruiters that I've worked with that have been they've said that they don't like the leaderboards in the office. They hate the call stats, which look, I'm I'm kind of in the middle about that. For me, I understand and I can empathize why a junior recruiter doesn't
Yeah.
appreciate the leaderboard when the top biller has done 300 to 500K every single year for the last 5 years. They've already got a list of clients.
Yeah.
My opinion and my sort of advice to those recruiters has always been, you're not going to compete with the guy that's been in the business 5 years that's got a business. Find people in the business to compete with. Find someone else that's in a similar market. So, like for me, I was always competing against Akbar. He'd been doing that market already 3 years, and his fees were significantly larger, and he was getting jobs called in whilst I was just starting. But my ego was like, I'm going to compete with him, and I was always very close to him, but I would always get beat by him. Again, not making excuses, but like what you said, you're only as good as the market and all the rest of it, right? But that's kind of my thing. And then the second thing, and I kind of want to see what your opinion is on this, because you've run a recruitment business yourself. The call stats back in the day, oh, I loved it, because again, that was one thing I knew I could beat Akbar on. Like, he was like my arch nemesis at the time, but we were best mates, was because that was fully in my control. That was absolutely in my control. And if he did more calls than me, but I had more call time, fantastic. But guess what? At the end of the month, if I had 400 hours worth of call time or whatever it is, and fucking 1,000 phone calls, but I put no money on the board, I put no interviews, I've added no new logos, I look like a fucking idiot. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So I like the idea of call stats, but I know that there's a lot of people that in 2025, they're like, oh, it's archaic, it's not a true representation of where your billings are going to be. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion, because it's quite not a hot topic, but it's been brought up quite a few times.
I think it's polarized, isn't it? But I think it's like anything. I think it's a process. So for me, when I work with people that are new to the job, I think actually gaining the process of knowing how much activity you need, and the level and the pushing, and you have to learn psychological skills. So, you're saying how to deal with people for somebody who's very young, who's not had dealt with people a lot. So they're going to have to learn people skills. They have to learn how to sell. So I think they're great as a tool to hone skills. I genuinely, when I first started recruitment, I started many years ago in industrial, and I made loads of calls and I got deep into it. I was horrendous because I was the worst, because I was phoning and saying the wrong things because I was willing to put myself out there. And rather than being honed at that point, I was very much a rough kind of diamond, hopefully, I'd like to think of myself. And I was just bludgeoning my way through, and clients were like, no, it's a no, we wouldn't use agency. Like, well, what would I need to do to, and they were not convertible. They didn't use, they were a one-man band, never used. But in my head, I can convert you. So I think what happens is you transition then to the right area of sales. And like I say about AI, and we talk about it a lot, and everyone loves it or doesn't, and different things, it has its place. I find that, without making those 1,000 calls, 2,000, 5,000, you're not as good by 5,001. AI is now helping the youth of today thinking there's an easy way out. And I think there isn't. I deal with, board member clients, and I've dealt with, people all over the world at senior level, and then the next call be a welder, phoning in going, giz job. And you're just like, yeah, no problem, it's fine. And you kind of, what you realize is that you have to deal with all walks of life. And I find that is the only way. So for me, KPIs are great, because what you find is it's just spotting gaps. It's literally to spot. And as much as like you made 30 calls, well done, they could be absolutely bloody useless. I used to book meetings sometimes because I was targeted, and I booked 12 meetings and they'd all be bloody awful. I'd go in and half of them would be like, I don't ever use, but here I am. But I think, definitely the what's it called? Because I've done it, and maybe I'm biased and there's a bit of a soft spot for it. I feel that competing nowadays with emails, I feel that phone calls, you can generate more out of a phone call. You can learn a lot. You can push a client. You can challenge them. Whereas I feel that emails just seem to totally take away the skill of the person.
Oh, I totally agree. And look, I think emails for sending out profiles and stuff like that, fantastic. But my little saying to recruiters has always been, an email is great to entice, but you can't influence. The video call like this, and in-person meeting is obviously 10 times better. That's when you influence people. And our job as a recruitment consultant is to consult and to influence people to make decisions, right? And a lot of people miss that. And there's a lot of people that are, and I understand why people are, quote, afraid or skeptical, because, and I can't remember what episode I mentioned this on, but when we were growing up as children, we were told by our parents two main things as children, right? don't interrupt don't interrupt me when I'm busy, and don't speak to strangers. As a recruitment consultant, your entire job is to speak to strangers and interrupt people when they're busy. So it goes
I know.
completely against our societal upbringing, but it's just what you have to do. And like, you know, you and I have been in this industry a good amount of time now to realize that you can go back and forth on email all you like, but the minute you get on that phone to somebody, like, you build that relationship. And I know some people are like, oh, fucking relationships, but that's what, for me, that's what it's all about. You build the relationship, you information gather. And yeah, that's how like the cycle of recruitment moves, is via conversation on the phone, video calls like this.
I'd say as well, education is one of the biggest things I find. I mean, how many industries do you sell a product that doesn't turn up to be the product you ordered ever? Recruitment. And I think if you're dealing with people that are rational, so your candidate can be, your client can be, you can be. So it's a real cesspool of challenges. So for me, sometimes the candidate wants so much money that is beyond what a client can physically afford because of their structure. Sometimes the client wants to pay so low, they want the Ferrari for the price of a Corsa. And it's kind of leveling with people in an education way to say, listen, you know, will they make a lot more than their salary? Yeah, maybe think about upping it. And I think for me, it's that the trust process. And as a byproduct, like we talked about before, I think the issue that happens is admin explodes from success. So dealing with your candidate, your client, the admin explodes and it's problematic. And I think that's where the chaos comes in. But in terms of the skill set, yeah, it's so human and empathizing with the understanding of what they want to achieve. I mean, my greatest tip, I suppose, that I think worked really well for me was I actually think as if I'm the client, and I also put myself in the shoes of the candidate as well. And if I wouldn't take the job, and if I wouldn't give the job, and I would negotiate both ways as if I'm both of them, and it's a really fair way to do it, because unfortunately you do lose fees because you sometimes say to a candidate, "Listen, better job out there for you. The other offer's better," but you don't create that mistrust and try and force people down the wrong path. Same with the client. If a client is offering, you know, something that is not enough, you know, to educate them to not look ridiculous in the markets, to just say, listen, the market's changed. This is what happens now. And, you know, we can go around forever, or what are you going to give? And then they hate that question. But I would say, what are you going to give? And they always go, what do you mean? It's like, well, you have to go for less skill, maybe somebody who's very good at the job yet, or you're going to have to find another type of person that is, you know, or you're going to have to put the money up, you know, find a person with the money. So pay the money or find where you're going to give. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the process comes in for me, I suppose.
Yeah, that's where a lot of deals fall flat on their ass, when recruiters don't understand what the true desire, need, most important things are for the candidate, their reason for leaving. They've not got flexibility from the candidate in terms of the rates and stuff like that. So I agree with you. But back onto the KPIs thing, because something popped into my head about, I had a meeting on Friday with somebody that's setting up an arm of a recruitment business, and there was a few things he said that I was like, oh, really? Okay. Like, we don't do cold calling here. I was like, right, okay, interesting. We don't really do KPIs here. And then I was kind of like scratching my head, like, you don't do KPIs. It was like, well, the only thing we'll KPI is interviews. I think it was like CVs to interviews. And interviews, and he was like, we don't KPI them on new jobs added. Obviously, we will KPI them on finances and stuff. And I was like, right, okay. And I was a bit confused by it, but they're trying, and they're one of those recruitment businesses that are really just trying to not reinvent the wheel, but like, they don't want, I think he's come from a very traditional cowboy recruitment company, just like throwing KPIs at people. So they're like, right, I'm going to do it totally different. Now, I've worked in both environments. I've worked in an environment, like I said, print out with the figures, no data, no KPIs, nothing. And I've worked in environments where it is, like I said, you have to do X amount of meetings, and people are just putting meetings through the system for the sake of it. My opinion is that if you're going to use KPIs, you can't bash people over the head with them. And you have to make people realize that, just as if you were going to go and work with a personal trainer or a nutritionist, if you want to lose weight or put muscle mass on, you have to kind of go through your macros, you have to go through your lifting and calories burn. You have to make them feel as if I hit these KPIs, this is how much I'm going to bill. If I haven't billed that because I haven't hit those KPIs, then I need that. That's kind of my mentality around it. What's your sort of opinion on it?
I agree. If you've got no metrics to actually measure, how do you know what isn't working? I think, and that's something that, you know, to be fair, when I set up my own company, I was kind of of the same mindset, like, do you know what? Let's almost bohemian. Let's let it work. It'll work or it won't. It'll work out. And I think what you realize very fast is that you've had years of experience to achieve something and basically carve out your day-to-day processes. But juniors don't. So I think the only way to sometimes diagnose where they're struggling is to have KPIs to understand what they're doing. Again, beat them over the head, no, demotivating, but certainly give them the targets to follow. And if they're not hitting them, you can understand why.
Quick one from me, if you're enjoying today's video, two things. First and foremost, like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, all that kind of good stuff. The other thing is, as you probably already know, the way I fund this podcast is through my coaching business. So if you're listening or watching this podcast, you're probably someone that is all about personal development, right? So if you're all about personal development and you want to develop your mindset, you want to develop some real world strategies, or perhaps it's simply just the recruitment aspect. Been in this industry over 10 years. I've been in the L&D space for over 3 years now, and I'm so passionate about helping people. I feel like this is the purpose that I've been put on this earth for, is to help people in this recruitment industry. So if you're interested in coaching, in training as a recruiter, or perhaps you're a business owner and you want to upskill everyone in the business, take your company to the next level, then why don't you just reach out to me? You can reach out on LinkedIn. All my contact information is on my banner and in my profile, and also on my website. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into today's episode.
So without them, I just think it's terrifying.
Yeah, it is, man. It really is. Because I did nursing recruitment, temporary nurses for two years, and we didn't have any targets. It was like, yeah, he's doing all right. Like, it's just like the figures have come in this week. Charles is doing all right. We'll leave him alone. And then the next week, it's like, whoa, you were close to hitting 10K weekly GP. Now you're on 5. What's going on? And I'm like, oh, a bunch of these nurses, they're on holiday. And they're like, oh, mate, you need to get some more nurses. You're like, right, okay, right. It's just very much a feel. And I think in business and in recruitment, having the feel element is good sometimes. I.e., when a consultant comes in, they haven't shaved their beard, or if a female recruiter comes in, they're usually dressed to the nines. And for the last few days, they're like not really taking care of their appearance, both men and female, by the way. But you kind of look at that and you feel, let's take them aside and see if they're okay. That's where the feel comes in. You can't just sit there and feel, oh, like figures have gone down, or you haven't had many interviews, like pick it up. Like, unless you've got the data, which I know you guys at TenRecs are adding that to the system. I just think that, especially think about it from my perspective as an external trainer and coach, I go into a business and I'm like, right, I want to come in and help you guys get a return on investment from my service. How the fuck am I meant to do that if there's no like data such as, oh yeah, like little Jimmy here has pulled more jobs? What does that fucking mean? Do you know what I mean? It's so hard, man. It really is.
It's terrifying. So we developed like an advanced analytics about 2.5 years ago, and it follows literally so temp and perm, with your weekly turnover, with your commission, where you're making your money. So which clients, which methods you're using to source those, where the higher hours are. You can granularly look at everybody. And I think for me, what I worked out was genius. With that, a lot of accidents made to get there, but we worked out that you start to get patterns of people, and all of a sudden you can see the recipe of success. And I think that what you tend to find is we can look at activity in our system as well. So we look at activity, we look at the yield, and we compare the both and see, right, well, what's type A doing, who's or recruiter A that's super successful, versus Jim who's struggling a little bit. So let's have a quick look. And we look at the two, and then a lot of the time it's activity focused. Sometimes some of them have all their eggs in one basket. So one big client making loads of money, and that drops off, and then they've got nothing. And it's interesting how when you're so deep in it and you're selling and you're fighting fires, to step back and look at it is quite hard as somebody who's younger. I think you almost need someone to look at it and go, right, well, let's look at it all. And oh my God, that's quite clear, isn't it? You've got one client and they're not spending anymore. Are you selling every day? No. How are we going to get someone else then? And it's like, oh shit, you good point. I need to sell. But yeah, absolutely. We need to be getting the calls in, because you need some more. We need to get some protection. Yeah. And it is funny how just that kind of knowledge is something you don't think about if you're in it. I still do it now sometimes in different businesses, and so you support and work with. Unless you step back and look at what's going on, it is very difficult to know where to go. He's going on you can keep bludgeoning your way forever and getting it wrong, or you can go, do you know what? There's a clear issue. The figures speak volumes. I'm going to follow the data. And I always say follow the data, because if you follow, like you say, the feeling and the hunch, do you know what? I think I'm just having a tough week. You haven't built for 6 months. I'm having a tough 6 months, to be fine. You're clearly not getting something. Get the ego out of it, because that is a problem sometimes where people think they know best. I've sat with people who know better, and they go, well, are you being successful? No, but I definitely know best. Okay, well, my advice is just to maybe listen to what other options are and try
Mm.
some other things, because if it's not
Yeah.
working now, maybe some other activity could work. I mean, I've always
Hmm.
been an advocate of throw it at yourself. I'm the world's toughest critic to myself. So
Hmm.
when it comes to anything I've not done right, I dissect it and work out what didn't I
Yeah.
do properly? Why? Could it be better? And if it could be,
Hmm.
what can I do to push everything? So I truly believe in continuous improvement of everyone,
Mm.
of oneself.
Yeah.
And, I think that's kind of recruitment. I think in sales
Hmm.
in general, I also agree. You hone your skills and you're either, and I don't believe in plateau. I think you're either going backwards or you're improving
Yeah.
at all
Yeah.
times,
Yeah, I
personally.
totally agree. There's something I was going to say on that, and you mentioned ego, which we'll talk about in a second. But something that I've been explaining to consultants on my one-to-one coaching sessions all year is something that I learned from both my managing director and sales director at my not my last company, the company before when I was a
Yeah.
consultant. And they said to me, pull up your leads list, pull up your tasks list, because on Bullhorn we had a list of tasks that it would automatically repeat every 2 weeks, whenever. And
Yeah.
my sales director would always sit down and look at the data and say, I can predict you're going to bill X amount in this month, this month, this month. And I'd always scratch my head. And obviously, I was only like early 20s. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to predict that? Because you've not got enough leads and all the stuff
Yeah.
that you've been doing has been long-term relationship building, which is great, by the way. But I can't see where your next few jobs are going to come. You're at latter stage interview process for your 5-10 exclusive jobs you're working on your desk now. So what's going to happen when all of those close? And I was like, oh, it's a really good question. Well, I can backfill the other positions. Okay, cool. But that's not really, what happens if they just don't have budget? What happens if they don't use recruiters? You can't, that's not really the best. That's a good thing to do, but you can't just rely on that. Where are your interview leads? Where's your market insight leads? Where's your project insight? Like, where's your information that you've gathered from the market? Like, what candidates are you taking to market now that are in your shortlist for these jobs that weren't necessarily right at the time? Or maybe they are, but you haven't worked any other candidates. And it was like, he never done it with any emotion. There was never any like malice to it.
Business.
It was business. And he would have the
Yeah.
laptop and turn it around and it would show like my leads would always be in the red and my spec outs would always be in the red. Interviews and jobs on were good, but I would always think, fuck. So whenever I now work with consultants, most recruitment businesses, Mark, they don't have a lead generation process. They don't have a lead chasing process. They spec a candidate on an e-shot and then they never follow up, right? It's fucking shit, which is good for me as an external coach. Yeah, it's great because I then go in, implement this basic ass process and they're like, wow, you're the messiah, right? But that's like a good way to kind of see where you're going to be billings wise. And that's why for me, if you're not having this data and you have to scroll through tons of emails to see when your last one was and you don't have that there, it's hard, man. And the job's hard enough as it is.
So difficult. And I think you also need like a three-dimensional, what their natural talent. Like I always find you're either usually quite a dominant in the fact you can close with sales, or you're a nurturer and you're more of an account manager.
Yeah.
And then so then you have to like police that area with like the training to see, are you going to close loads down? But is the business any good? So I used to find people so I've worked with people that would win roles left, right, and center, but they didn't know what the role was and they didn't have much data on it. And it was like, well, how do we fill it now? And it's like, is it any good? What's margin you got? I don't know. And I've had other people that go so into detail that they get to the point where they knew more than the director, but they didn't ever get the role because they wouldn't close it down to win it because they felt uncomfortable asking for the business. They've given it 5 times, but they refused and wanted more info. But I think with your personality and the metrics, I just feel that you do really get a grip fast. And because recruitment, the amount of people I see fall into the cycle of getting poor business, it's massive. And then what do you do? Because you're trapped. Because then you're churning like it's like the rat race. You're on a wheel spinning. I many years ago worked in a company where there was a consultant there who I heard of and I've seen a lot of the roles online. I was like, oh my God, this guy is the real deal. He's doing the business, he's amazing. I'm gonna have to try and beat him. And because he moved over to the company and I worked really hard, terrified that the figures were going to come out that it was going to say that he's going to be like 50 grand ahead of everyone in the margin. And he was like way lower. And I couldn't get my head around it. And I was like, okay, so I kept pushing it. And then I went to the head office to meet him one day. I was there anyway. And it turned out that the business he had was so low margin percentages, he needed roughly like 70 temps out to get anywhere near what I was doing with a couple of perms and 30 or 20 temps out. So my desk just ran itself. Whereas, he was killing himself and he worked bloody hard and he did well.
Mm,
But in terms of the profitability, it was like almost nothing. So
really?
he couldn't sell. He had no time to sell because he was too busy filling in because he raced the bottom. He priced very low to win the business. And therefore it was just, where do you go? And the only thing is, it's a hard thing to say. Get rid of it, drop it and
Yeah.
sell. Let
Yeah.
it go. And I think that's kind of what, again, back to ego before we go into it. I think that's what kind of drives people. Like, well, I've got something, I've got a role, I've got it, it's
Yeah.
comfortable.
I've
You
been
need to
there.
be you need to be uncomfortable, I think. And I think it's
Mm,
difficult because if you're doing badly, it's hard to pick up the phone. And I
mm,
empathize with people, and it's difficult because you don't come across well, and maybe you're not particularly positive when you're phoning. And if you're doing
yeah.
well, I always say to people, this is the time to sell hard. And they'd be like, well, I'm
Yes.
doing well though. And you're like, no, get on the
Yeah.
phone now because let's
Yeah.
keep this momentum going so you
A
never
hundred
slow down.
percent. 100%. And just to add on to that, your messaging is identical to mine because I always say to people, the busier you are, the more jobs you have on your desk is the perfect time to work the candidate, take them to market. Because guess
Yeah.
what? If a client then comes back and says, yeah, Mark looks fantastic, we'd like to interview him, but we can only do 12.5% terms. And you come back and go, okay, cool. Well, he's actually out with 3 of my other clients. They're all at 20% exclusive. So
Yeah. No
unfortunately,
problem.
I can't. And they're like, whoa, but we want to interview them. Like, can we do something? You're now in that like not power position, but you have the advantage where you can negotiate because
It's
if they turn
leverage.
around and say, I'm sorry, mate, but I can't do anything more than 13%, you can walk away from that because you've
Yeah.
got so many jobs. I've got a client at the moment. She's got 25 jobs on her desk right now. And since I've worked with her since like January, since January, she started like start of January, done a few training sessions, a few coaching sessions. She's now consistently got a minimum fee of like 17.5 to 22.5%, sold a lot of exclusive roles. And she's got clients now coming back to her, cutting the Teams calls short because they don't have time. They're coming back and saying, right, HR's looped in. We can't do more than 13%. And my last
Yeah.
coaching session last week, she was just like, Charles, what do I do? Mate, you have 25 jobs on your desk. Tell them to, my language, tell them to fuck off. Like you have
Yeah.
got so much business right now. This is the perfect time. And thankfully, she's taken this advice on and she's getting so much bite from the candidates she has already in processes. So she's
Yeah.
working smart rather than completing all her pipeline and going, right, fucking back to square one again, better do BD. And it's like, no, that's what the best performers do. They do their sales and business development when they're busy because they don't come across as desperate. And I've been there. Like after the pandemic, I've
Totally
been
agree.
there. Like 2021, had to start a brand new desk, didn't really know too much about it. What did I do? I targeted the big boys. I'm having to speak to the TAs in Boston and fucking wherever to deal with like German manager roles. They had no idea about the role themselves, and I'm taking it on low fees. And my boss is looking at me going, mate, you're never going to fill that. But the
Yeah.
ego inside of me was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong. And it just, I wasted so much time on roles that everyone else in the business knew I was never going to fill because you're having to go through this like third party person that knows fuck all about the spec. They're not giving you any flexibility. You have to sign their terms or the rest of it. But that kind of leads us on, I guess, perfectly to the ego aspect, right? So
Yeah.
again, you've worked in recruitment a long time. Like ego is a big thing in this industry,
Oh,
right?
huge.
Massive thing. And I think there's a positive element of ego and there's obviously a negative aspect of ego. If
Yeah.
I were to
And it's a
ask you,
spectrum.
yeah,
Spectrum.
and it is indeed. If I were to ask you then, where does ego as a founder, as a recruiter, and everything in between, where would you say the key points help you and hinder you when it comes to ego?
Right. So help, I think that they drive you. I think your ego drives you. It's the one source of motivation that no matter how bad you're doing, no matter how well you're doing, it keeps you checked in. I think it's all about pushing. Recruitment is literally one of the greatest onslaught jobs ever. But I also feel that you know your worth with ego. So without going too into psychology of everything, I find that ego, when you know your self-worth, as you get more and more progressive, I feel that the roles get better, the clients get more collaborative, you become partners, you can be honest and open, which you should be all the time. And I feel that all of a sudden then your ego kind of just sits below maybe your servitude. So
Yeah.
your servitude's a bit more, and then your ego goes, no, no, I'm good at what I do. And when you've got results and you backs it up, the ego's great. When it's bad, I think
Mm.
when it's a bit out of balance, so if you can be slightly, I mean, everyone can be slightly delusional about stuff. They can say, I am going to fill this no matter what I do. And yet you've worked it for 7 months and you've got no money on the table. And And that's what people do. I've been there. I've been there ruthlessly phoning it through, and the client won't increase the fee. So the only way to fill it is to me to keep going. It wasn't fillable.
Yeah.
Give it up. Give it up. And I
Yeah.
think that that's what hinders you. Waste time by indulging your ego in a negative way.
Yeah.
I've done it. I think everyone in the world
I
has
think
probably done it.
everyone
But
has. Yeah.
in recruitment, I think you sometimes need to know when to give up, when to cut your losses, move on
That's a
to
good
something
point.
that's going to work for you. And also, I think one thing I think with ego is sometimes you think you're so good that no matter what they give you, you can fill it or resolve it or do it. Whereas
Mhm.
sometimes the experience comes in knowing that actually it's not egoist. I need to educate. I
Yeah.
cannot do this, and I've tried, and I'm going to give them
Mhm.
the data. And then you
Yeah.
give them the data, and also they go, okay, then we can put it up, or we can do this. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, then the ego works. But again, if you just bludgeon and you know best and you don't listen, let's face it, a lot of consultants come in and they're young and they're ready for the world and they're the best person in the world, and their ego drives them more than the sales. Now, a lot of these people do well, but a lot of
Mhm.
them, if they're not doing well, won't take criticism. And I think that's
That's the
the
big thing.
that's the greatest weakness in my opinion, because I've always taken criticism. You have to. If you're
Yeah.
not doing something, there's some criticism to be taken.
Yeah.
No matter what
Yeah.
that is, perhaps it is the market, but it's
Mhm.
still, be open to the fact it could be you. Maybe
Yeah.
you're too aggressive in your sales. Maybe you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not doing enough. But
Mm.
I think that ego for me is absolutely critical to be good. Without
Yeah.
saying to clients, listen, I don't need your business, but if you pay me well enough, I'm happy to do it. That takes ego. It's not confidence. I
Mm.
think there's ego in that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, if you get it wrong and say, listen, I don't need your business, and you're not that good, and you
Yeah.
can't back it up, that's when I say to people, don't. I've had people like agree to fees that are ridiculous and go, yeah, we'll do that. And then they find the candidate and they go, oh no, yeah, we'll work something out. And they go on site, and then all of a sudden there's chaos and trouble, and you're like, your ego is basically, you've just dragged it through knowing it's probably going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Just you should have said, I can't do it. It's not going to happen. But ego does create possibilities, sometimes that are a bit
Mhm.
delusional. So
Yeah,
you,
I've got a very good anecdote outside of recruitment that will make sense, because I think in recruitment you're not going to get the anecdote I'm going to go down the line is in the combat sport martial art thing. You're not
yeah,
going to get that punch in the face knockdown moment in recruitment. You might, but sometimes you might get rejected by a client, or the deal doesn't go through because you've had a big ego and it's not enough for you to go, okay, fuck, that didn't work, and it suppresses your ego. About 4 years ago, this young kid came into our gym. Bear in mind, it was built on next to a school, so a lot of the kids from the school and sixth form used to come. And I was sparring with him, and we do touch sparring and play sparring. So it's almost like point fighting. So you
yeah,
touch each other. Sometimes you wear mouth guards, sometimes you don't. But the whole point is you hit, you don't get hit. And if I hit you, it's like, oh, wait, got you, like that. And every single time I jabbed him, every single time I low kicked him, you could just see him bite down on his
yeah.
mouthpiece, and was just like, I'm going to get this guy. And continued. I went easy on him because he was a lot younger than me, and I was just like, I'm not going to do anything stupid, right? And as soon as we had like a 30-second break, I said to him, I was like, mate, your ego, right, in sparring is unuseful. That ego when you're hitting pads is useful. When you're hitting pads and your brain is saying, oh my God, I'm gassed, I'm really tired, and your ego says, no, push through, brilliant. But when you're sat there opposite someone that's been doing this for a very long time, and your ego is like, I've just been hit, I'm going to hit you harder. Not good. It's not good etiquette, and you're going to get really badly hurt. What does he do? Takes his mouthpiece out. It's like, it's cool, bro. It's cool. Oh God, this kid is going to get fucking knocked out at this rate. So he's picked on the biggest kid in the class, who's like double my size, right? Double my fucking size. And he wanted to spar after class. Bear in mind, this is the kid's first ever Thai boxing class. First ever
Yeah.
class, right? He'd done some boxing before. And as you know, the boxers, they do a lot of the head movement. You do that head movement in a kickboxing or Muay Thai gym, you're going to get knocked out, right? I'm giving everyone the clue here. What happens? He's sparring the big guy. The big guy's looking at me, and I'm just like, go easy, go easy. The kid throws a fucking huge overhand right, but like the boxing style where the head comes down like that. The other guy just lifted his leg up to go for like a body kick, but because the guy's head's gone down so low and he's gone for a big overhand, he's been kicked straight in the face, knocked spark out, stiff as a plank, just sat there like that. The instructor, who stayed 10 minutes late, even though he had to go and get his kids and whatnot, had to run into the thing, like wave it off, like, right, everyone, we're done. The kid gets
Yeah.
up and literally is like, come on, let's go again. It's like, brother, no,
Yeah. Know your
you
limits.
can't. But he didn't realize, bless him, because he's been knocked out. They'd been knocked out. So he's like, we'll go again. He's still on the floor, surrounded by us. I was like, mate, you have been knocked unconscious. You need to go to hospital. And he looked around the room and was like, did I get knocked out? He was like, oh shit, I had no idea. So I had to get on my hands and knees, help him up. And I was like, mate, I said this to you earlier in the class. Ego helps when you're hitting pads. It doesn't help when you're sparring. You need to learn from this. And, thankfully the kid learned from his lesson, came back to the next class and he was humbled, right? You see a lot of that with the fighters. Yeah. I think in recruitment, the reason why I bring this up is sometimes people don't get humbled by these experiences because their ego is so big. They go, oh, I lost that on that deal, but they're a shit client anyway, or they're a shit candidate anyway. Sometimes you need to have these experiences and be grown up enough to just take a step back, like what you said, and go, is that helping me? Is it hindering me? Because ego, like I've been through a situation, Mark, in my career where I remember going around the office. I don't have an ego anymore. I was going for a bit of that spirituality phase, and I'm like, getting into meditation. And it was great in my personal life. It fucking sucked for my sales because I was like, oh, the deal didn't go through, but it's fine. I'm happy and I'm zen. Bro, no, you fucking need ego sometimes, man. If you've just blanked a month, you can't just be sat there cool. Like you need to be like, what can I do to get to that goal? Yeah. But yeah, I thought that'd be quite a funny anecdote.
And that's the nervous energy, I think. It's like, I think it's like almost like you have to have a number of little ingredients. And depending on your personality, means on the ingredients you need to be the most careful with. But I think, like they're saying, I think ego is a wonderful thing, but as long as it's not delusional. As soon as you get into delusional, you've got a problem because then you don't know what is real and what isn't. And it's very common, like saying your salesperson doing well for a year. I mean, we used to have I know a salesperson that was doing so well, his ego was off the chart. So he was a bit of a dick to people. Bit of a dick to people, didn't care. I remember we were in a meeting once and he went into the meeting and he went like that to someone. Come on, you here. Like, and he's in a sales thing and he just clicked him out. And I was like, that is so rude.
That's not nice,
the problem he had then though was because he could ride his ego because he was doing well, but because his ego then made him less respect or gave him less respect for people, as soon as his figures dropped, the sharks were circling, and he was doing actually okay, but not good as his ego allowed for.
Yeah.
So he was then in trouble because everyone couldn't wait for him to fail. So I think you have to kind of. It's better just to internalize it. Like for me, I was never a case of I never like saw it that they were better than me. I was better than them in any way in how I do it. But the ego drove me going, I want to be the top, but I also want to be the best version of me to beat them. And because I think when you do compete too heavily and you do lean on people and you have that like that, it can turn a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you keep it positive and, like saying I'd celebrate wins, a lot of people didn't, but like when someone did well, I'd email them and said, great work, amazing. I've got something to beat. Whereas that motivates me in a positive way. I like that because, it's much easier be chasing than being the front runner. Being the front runner to pace is hard, but to be second, third, very easy because you know who you need to beat. So for me, I think that's the case, I think.
Yeah, I think I can't remember the specific of it. I'll have to find it, but it was something about like ego is like having like a candle, like a flame, right? If without it, like you can't see, and it's just it's not very good. I'm probably butchering this, but people understand it. But the bigger the flame gets, it will just burn the fucking house down. And you've probably seen it. I've definitely seen it when like the director is just a fucking egomaniac. Like you said, the clicking of the fingers, going to meetings, going like scrolling through their phone, and you're just sat there like, right, are you listening to me? It's like, sorry, mate, got an email, go on, carry on. And then just carries on, and you're just like, right, so I'm just not important to you, all that type of stuff. So I think there's so many different ways of managing it for people. But what you said there, I really like of having a little bit of the external motivation from other people's success is good. But if you're just relying on that, it's probably not most useful. Really, you should be looking at what you're doing and focusing on improving yourself and competing with yourself than other people. But yeah, honestly, I could speak about the ego thing. I think that was my first ever article I wrote on LinkedIn like 7 years ago or something like that. But anyway, as you know, Mark, last question, and then I want to talk a little bit more before we completely wrap up about TenRecs and how people can reach out to you and a few of the new features. But as I'm sure you know, the last question I always end up on is, following this particular episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
I think, to be honest, it's probably linked to what we just talked about. So I think that, always be open to criticism, always be, positive about where you are, but always aspire for more. I think if you always want more but happy where you are, I do think that the day-to-day is easier. I think people, resonate with you more, and I think your job's easier as well. But I'd always say continuous improvement, one step in front of the other, but also there's so many areas to recruitment that don't seem skilled, but dealing with people is tough. So I'd say every day try and find something you can learn in every single area of your job, processes, how you deal with people. And to be honest, focus on the weakest bits. You focus on the bits you're the crappiest at, one day they'll be your strengths. And I found that that for
Mm.
me was the middle bit, the detail, going through detail. And that's why I focus very hard on making sure everything's where it needs to be, but I can still be chaotic at the front end and then I can see the results. So yeah, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it really.
Awesome. Love that. Cool. All right, Mark. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really, really appreciate doing this with you. In terms of what TenRecs are doing at the moment, just as we wrap up the last couple of minutes, because
Yeah.
I'm sure people would have been Googling and looking on LinkedIn to kind of see what it is.
Yeah.
Just as like a snapshot, what TenRecs is, what you guys are currently working on at the moment, and then obviously how people can reach out to you to book demos and stuff like that would be awesome.
Yeah, of course. So we're about to relaunch a website 2.0, which is going to means you can get a free trial immediately. But TenRecs essentially is, as far as I'm aware, it's the only full operational tool to manage temp and perm from the CRM ATS to the timesheets, to invoicing clients, to pay and bill, and then the analytics of all of the money you've made and how you've made it, and the commissions and the league tables and gamification, all under one license. So we're a system that's growing fast because if you're a one-man band, you can literally run your whole operation. If you do temps, perms, we might be a bit cheeky saying this, but I genuinely believe we're the best and most modern temp system on the market. Perms is very powerful, but Bullhorn and a few others that are established in perms might have the edge in just perms. However, if your company does both, we're the best. We cover everything. We can set you up easily. And from a perspective of costings, we are probably too cheap right now because we are trying to bring over recruiters that are forward thinking, that truly see. I mean, we're growing at thousands of percent each month, which is incredible. But we don't want to be greedy with it. We don't feel that if you're using 5 different types of software to run your business, how do you pull the KPIs and analytics to then see who's top? You can literally use our system just for the gamification and kind of the league tables. Your accountants or your payroll can use it just for the back office, for timesheets, very advanced. Or you can, front office can just use it. But ultimately, you'll never need to leave if you use everything and grow into it over time. So my suggestion is if you're one-man band, it's amazing. But if you're a huge organization, we can get it set up and tailor-made for you very, very easily. The bigger you are, the more savings and more money you will make at the same time.
That's awesome. And I know that you guys are really big on that. A lot of the software companies out there will, and I've got a few clients that have said this, we've been roped into an 18-month contract. And I'm sat there like, what if it doesn't work? And I've worked with software companies as a sales manager where you have to put the is it like a query? I don't know what the actual thing is, but you have to message them a ticket. That's it. You put a ticket in and be like, I can't listen back to my call, or for some reason I can't add this to the system. And then like 3 weeks later, you get somebody that comes back and says, okay, yeah, we're processing a ticket. And you're like, well, I've fucking resolved it now. Like, what's going on? I know that you guys from the many meetings that we've had and all the rest of it, you guys are very quick with how you process things. I know that you mentioned to me, and again, I could be butchering this, but and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a client that wanted a functionality added, and it was like 2 weeks, and then like, this is something bespoke that you wanted. Here it is. Like 2 weeks later, you're not tying in people for like these outrageous contracts, and you're just so honest, open, and transparent with how you guys work. Which I think for our industry that we're working, Mark, it's good to have more of that in the industry, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we try and do is we obviously get back to you within usually 2 hours tops. We also aim to tailor make, because obviously my background's operations and recruitment many years. My kind of goal is that when I demo, or one of the team demos, we understand that your business, where the weaknesses are, that we can solve. Like we said about ego, everyone's got different operations. You can have a mirrored company with a totally different operation. And unlike a lot of companies that we've spoken to that feel a bit let down by the salesman pushing them down this road, and then they said, this system doesn't do what we do either. It's for us to understand, if I was in your shoes, because I have been, what do you need, and can I show you the process flows to make it easy for your business? So for me, we're doing incredibly well with the right people. And the beauty is the market we cover now is probably everyone. So for us, we're fortunate. We cover everything well. We do. It's very advanced throughout. Most systems are a back office system has a poor front end. You're a front office system with a poor middle office or back end. The timesheets normally cost a fortune, which ours are incredibly advanced. So each of them are standalone. The temp features, the perm, the timesheets, everything's standalone. But we can also help you utilize it in your own business, and not in 6 to 8 weeks. We can help you within a day or two implement, get it in there. We've obviously put a lot of time over the last 7 years making something that essentially would appease me as someone that is essentially not very happy with most recruitment software. I've tried most that's on the market already over the years. Not a fan personally. I know it's changed and maybe it'd be different now, but all the ones I always found it was the biggest question to ask I find is, what is it you don't do? Because there's always an elephant in the room every time. So when they say to us, what is it you don't do? We just say that the integrators are coming now because we've spent all of our time and effort building features, so you don't need integrators. However, we are now in a place to put them in. So if they say, what don't you do? I'd say if you need any specific integrators, we've got 30 on the build right now. So if you need anything specific that we don't cover, maybe it's a very quick conversation. If you want a system that's going to manage your whole operation, unlike everything else, then you should come and have a look. And also the gamification is going to be accurate. It's going to be, I'm so excited for it. I can't wait. I really can't wait. I'm passionate about it because
I'm excited to see it because I bang on about it all the time, to be fair.
You know, one last thing, the biggest thing that we find in the market, the feedback we get is that no matter what software companies use, getting their sales staff to use it is near impossible. Brilliant. And for me, I've seen it. I've lived that as well in terms of being that person. And I think what we've done is made the system so approachable and friendly to use with all the kind of training guides that are click of a button, that I truly believe with the gamification as well, it means the front end will be loving it. And therefore the back end will see the data, they can run payroll, and then the directors are happy because they can see the money. Who's made it, how much their business is making in seconds. And therefore, as a compounded software, if you put the data at the beginning, it accelerates to the end and it's incredibly valuable. That's my sell.
Wonderful. Well, look, I'm going to put all the details at the bottom of this for your LinkedIn, for John's LinkedIn, the website. Obviously, when you've updated the website, hopefully that'll be in time. If not, it would just be whatever that is, the LinkedIn profile as well for TenRecs.
The website. So the website's still going. It's just we're trying to automate a lot of the kind of self-service. So you give them the website, not a problem.
Perfect. Wonderful. Like I said, everyone, all the information will be at the bottom of this podcast. Thank you very much for listening at this point. There's the newsletter for people to subscribe to, if I can get my bloody words out. But yeah, we're growing at a massive pace, similar to TenRecs. And, we've partnered on the Recruitment Agency Expo, and I'm sure there'll be other things that we'll partner with. So reach out to the both of us if you're interested. That's enough from us today. So thank you very much for listening, and until next week.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, like, subscribe, follow, drop a comment on either platform, and message me on LinkedIn what your biggest takeaway of today's episode is. If you also feel like somebody else could take some value from this, repost it, share it, tag someone in. If you think you or someone else could be a fantastic guest as well, put them in touch with me or get in touch with me yourself. We're always looking for new guests. And we only really have legends on this, as you can probably tell already. So as I mentioned, like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. It genuinely helps so much. And I've got massive plans for this podcast, and we're loving doing it every step of the way. Keep getting 1% better, everybody. Let me know what your biggest takeaway from today's episode is, and I'll see you next week.